Of course, the reticulated python feeds on things like monkeys, rodents, pigs, deer, birds, and of course they have occasionally been known to go for livestock, and they are confirmed people killers, and they wouldn't be able to swallow a fully grown man, but it could be possible that a reticulated python could kill and eat a child. I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, it might be possible, I'm not sure. Another thing about the reticulated python is that it's always been associated recently with Harry Potter because, as you can see here, is Voldemort's snake, Nagini. And of course, Nagini before was a woman who was a maledictus, which was a woman cursed with a blood curse that made her eventually turn permanently into a beast, and she became a snake. But also she became one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, which means part of his soul existed inside Nagini. And it's actually believed that the reticulated python might have been what Nagini was based on, although unfortunately that has caused a lot of people to be afraid of snakes because of Nagini. But I'm not that scared of snakes. In fact, I think they're some of the most fascinating creatures in the world. And of course I would probably not want to handle a reticulated python in the wild. I handle a tame one because they are known to be quite snappy in the wild, and even though it's not venomous, a bite from one would be extremely agonising. Of course, around here is where they're found. Now, the last place I'm going to show you is Africa, and that is my favourite continent, as well as a place that is legendary for its wildlife. But the first reptile I'm going to show you is this, the Black Mamba. Now, the Black Mamba is the most feared snake in Africa, but it's also the fastest snake on Earth. Perhaps it can actively pursue prey, and it can go as fast as an Olympic sprinter. I mean, the name Black Mamba, I mean, it looks a bit ridiculous. I mean, it's not black at all, but the name actually comes from the black interior of its mouth. And the Black Mamba is probably the most feared snake in Africa because it has some of the strongest venom of any snake. In fact, it has venom that is powerful enough to quite possibly kill an adult human in about 2 hours. So that's one reason why it's such a feared snake. But it very rarely attacks people. I mean, it only strikes if it feels threatened or if it feels like there's nothing else to do. And it mostly feeds on reptiles. It mostly feeds on small mammals, birds, as well as lizards and frogs. Of course, I've never seen a black mamba before, but my mother grew up in Africa for many years, and she grew up just about here in Swaziland in southern Africa. She used to see snakes all the time on their doorstep, and they were very rarely bitten. But these days, a trip to the hospital and a dose of anti-venom and you'd be right as rain. However, it would still hurt a lot. And here is the Nile Crocodile. This is the largest reptile in Africa. A fully grown male can grow to be 6 meters long and weigh as much as a ton. And these animals have been around on the planet since long before the dinosaurs. But of course I'll get to that a bit later. The name crocodile in Africa means lizard of the Nile. And of course they've been around virtually unchanged for millions of years. And why? because they're the ultimate killing machine. Of course, there aren't many people in Africa that have got close to a Nile croc and lived to tell the tale. But of course, a lot of their diet is mostly made up of things like fish and amphibians and crustaceans. But in places like the Masai Mara in East Africa, the crocodiles are waiting for an annual event that they wait about a year for, which is the wildebeest migration, because herds of wildebeest are on their never-ending quest for fresh pastures. And that is when the crocodiles have the best feeding opportunity all year. If the wildebeest are either crossing the Mara River, or if they come down to the river to drink, and that's when the crocodile begins to hunt, because as well as its very, very keen sense of smell, sight and hearing, the crocodile also has sensors along its mouth that pick up vibrations in the water that can be either struggling animal or, even more commonly, wildebeest when they come down to the water's edge to drink. And then, once they begin to get close, the crocodile will sink under the water and completely disappear. And they can stay underwater for well over 2 hours. And they can do that by slowing their heartbeat to just 3 beats a minute and rationing the oxygen in their blood. And incredibly, a fully grown crocodile can hide in no more than 30 millilitres of water, and it can remain unseen for as much as 3 hours. Then, once it's close enough, it will swish its powerful tail and leap out of the water. First it will shut its eyes to protect them, and then it will grab a hold of its prey like wildebeest, bringing down a ton of pressure, and then it will drag its prey back into the water, and it will more than likely drown it. And of course, and it's when the feeding begins that crocodiles actually show a social side to them, because they're unable to dine alone, because their teeth are for gripping prey, not tearing it apart. So rather than fend off other crocodiles, the crocodile that's made the kill will welcome them to the feast. So what they will do is they'll all take turns to hold down the carcass, while one crocodile clamps down with his massive jaws, locks his back and neck muscles, and will roll. And that rolling there is how the crocodiles tear off chunks of meat. It's known as the death roll, and a lot of people believe it's down to that crocodiles use the death roll to kill their prey, but it's more often used when feeding to pull off chunks of meat. In fact, crocodile can actually consume half a ton of meat in one go, which is absolutely phenomenal. And they eat everything, not just the flesh, but also hide, hair, bone, horn and hoof. Nothing goes to waste. If you're wondering what happens to all that bone and hoof, well, crocodiles have probably the strongest stomach acids of any animal, so for them, it's no problem. Of course, crocs often lose teeth while feeding or catching prey or even fighting for territory, but that's not a problem for them, as if they lose a tooth, another will just roll back into place. As you can see here, Nile crocodile mothers will usually lay their eggs on a sandy bank. They'll dig a hole and lay their eggs and then cover it in sand, and they will spend weeks to maybe a couple of months protecting their nest until the young are ready to hatch. And of course, one way that crocodiles have been around for so long is during lean times, like in Africa, when it's the dry season and the rivers dry up and it gets very, very, very hot. So crocodiles can just scrape out a burrow and just go deep into the ground and just go to sleep and shut down their bodies, relying on their fat reserves that will see them through the lean times, and they can ride out the droughts, staying asleep in suspended animation for weeks, months, or even potentially years. And it's this nifty trick that helped the crocodiles outlast the dinosaurs and survive the ice ages. And it's all possible as well that this might help them outlast humanity. And here is their range in Africa. And the next reptile of Africa I'm going to show you is this, the African rock python. Now, the African rock python is the largest snake in Africa. It can grow to be 6 meters in length and weigh almost as much as me. And like all constricting snakes, they have long needle-like teeth in their mouths that point backwards towards the throat, so once they get a hold of prey, they won't let go and there's no way it can escape. And of course, as well as their forked tongue that can pick up all different kinds of senses of smell and taste from the air, they also have special heat-sensitive scales running along the upper lip that actually pick up the warmth given off by the moving muscles of their prey. And believe it or not, of course, like all the pythons, they kill using constriction. So what they will do is, quite often, they'll hide in a water hole and wait for an animal like an antelope or a young wildebeest to come down to drink, which can take weeks or even months, and then they will leap out of the water, grab a hold of their prey, and then wrap coils of the body around the animal, and then they can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze until there's no lung space left and the animal suffocates. Then the python will then begin to swallow its prey whole, and like with the anaconda, it will dislocate and unhinge its entire jaw and just walk it across its meal, and it can swallow things larger than its own head. And after a meal like an antelope, it won't have to eat again for a year. So it could survive without food again for a year. Of course, here is the range of the rock pythons. Now, the next reptiles I'm going to show you are some of my favourite reptiles. They are the chameleons. Now, I adore chameleons. I think they're some of the most fascinating creatures on the planet. And of course, probably the most famous thing about chameleons is that they can change the colour of their skin, but not many people know that chameleons will change their colour much quickly and respond to their emotions or mood. It can be to fear, anger, or to try and protect a territory, because quite often male chameleons like these two who will fight for the best territory and breeding rights. So when they get angry, they really show it. But it's probably the two things that I find most fantastic about chameleons is their eyesight and their hunting method. And their eyesight, of course, as you can see, they're always swiveling their eyes around. In fact, they can actually swivel their eyes around independently to about 360 degrees. And then, if they lock onto an insect, they will bring both their their eyes forward and focus